My mill abruptly called and said, "I heard you finally divorced my son. You're just not good enough for my son. I keep advising you to get a divorce from Mason sooner because of this." Well, I finally realized that I haven't been able to get along with my mill since earlier. "Mason and I got divorced 3 years ago," my mill said in an almost comical way, but I was able to contain my laughter. "Hello, my name is FAI. I live with my cat, Chaco, which I rescued 2 years ago. 3 years ago, I was married. I met my ex-husband Mason through a friend, and we got married. Up until that point, I didn't know who he really was. However, over time, I started to see Mason for the person he truly was. After we got married, he graduated from college, but Mason, who had never received much criticism before, quit his job shortly after we were wed. Mason hid it from me for a while, until I discovered his withholding tax slip in the room. When I confronted him, he said, "It's okay, we're married." Mason then worked for another company, but it didn't work for him, so he changed jobs once more. If Mason didn't like working with people, I suggested he work in assembly line production, but he had this strange pride that he couldn't do a job that even a high school graduate could do. Nevertheless, he couldn't stay unemployed, so I persuaded Maso. Mason's good looks made it seem like there were always other women around. He cheated on me multiple times while we were dating. Every time I threatened to end our relationship, he would respond, "The others are just for fun. You're the only one for me, FAI." Foolishly, I would forgive him, go back to him, and the cycle of cheating would continue. When I finally made the decision to end our relationship for good, he surprised me by proposing with a ring. My parents were very against it, saying that I would undoubtedly struggle, but I was filled with an unexplainable confidence that I could turn Mason around. I was naive enough to think that everything would work out if I just held firm, but reality wasn't so sweet, and Mason turned out to be a mama's boy. While Mill chastised me for taking her son away, we didn't live together, but my Mill called me every day, asking trivial questions like, "What's Mason doing? Are you making sure Mason eats properly? You're not making Mason lonely, are you?" She should be calling Mason himself, but instead of phoning me, she should be calling him. Nevertheless, I couldn't firmly respond because I didn't want to offend my Mill so soon after we were married. I asked Mason to reduce the frequency of unannounced visits and calls from my mother-in-law, but he said, "Why? It's fine, isn't it? Don't you hate it when my mom calls you or comes over every day?" "Not really. My mom is bored at home. You should be a companion for her." "Huh?" So I asked my mother to have Mason call and visit me every day, just like my Mill did. "Mason, what's Faith doing now? Are you making sure Faith eats properly? Are you properly grateful to Faith?" I had my mother say the things my mother-in-law had said to Mason. Surprisingly, Mason quickly reacted. "Hey, can you tell your mother to stop calling me every day? It can't be helped, right? My mother has free time too. I can't answer the phone to speak with her because I have to talk to Mason's mother, so you have to talk to her." "No, that's not what I meant." Mom was so happy. Normally she would get scolded if she called every day to talk about nothing important, but Mason was so kind and told her she could call as often as she wanted. "I never said that." That's strange, isn't it? Because when I asked you to tell your mom to stop calling me every day, you said you didn't care about my mom calling you every day, right? Just because I said that doesn't mean she has to call me every day. It's driving me crazy. Then tell your mother the same thing. My mother is different. It's exhausting because it's your mother. It's the same for me. Then you should answer your mom's calls. I will not answer any calls from your mom from now on. After discussing with Mason, I sent a message to my Mill asking her to contact Mason for everything in the future, and I blocked her calls and messages. However, when my Mill realized she couldn't reach me, she started visiting more often. She used to only come on weekends, but now she started coming even on weekdays when I wasn't home due to work. She used the spare key that Mason gave her without my permission to enter the house and rummage through things as if they were her own. I was really shocked when I came home from work on a weekday and found my Mill comfortably sitting in the house. Her behavior escalated, like when she said, "Where's that Louis Vuitton bag?" "Oh, that. It was lovely, so I took it." "Why would you take it without asking? Isn't the wife's stuff the same as mine?" "Don't be so uptight, Faith. She steals my personal belongings or says, 'Oh, Faith, I borrowed a little money.' She would also take money without permission." Then, on another day at noon, the doorbell rang, and when I checked, it was the pizza delivery man. Mill was still coming over to our house and invited, as usual, and she said, "Oh, Faith, make sure to pay for the pizza." What she ordered delivery without my permission and asked me to pay for it. I had no choice but to pay for it, but I received 2 pizzas. "There's nothing for you, Faith. If you want some, order it yourself." She made me pay for it, and my Mill and Mason ate the pizza in front of me with relish. I was furious. Right then and there, in front of Mill and Mason, I took the money Mill had taken from Mason's wallet and the money for the pizza and left. I ended up eating barbecue alone that night. I didn't go home but stayed at a manga cafe, returning home early the next day. The mess they left behind from their meal was everywhere when I returned, and I didn't talk to Mason much after that. Mason then used that as an excuse to start cheating, meeting up with the other woman or sending her discreet messages at first, but when he realized I wasn't interested, he talked to his mistress on the phone. Phone right in front of me, or made plans to go out. With his crazily outrageous behavior, I started to wonder if this guy had even graduated from college. And to top it all off, Mill got into my car without permission and caused a wreck. Luckily, it was just my car and no one else's, but my car was totaled, and Mill ended up in the hospital with a broken hip. It's FAI's fault for not driving Mom around. You are to blame. In what manner will you accept accountability? I became impatient when Mason and Phil began blaming me for the accident, for no apparent reason. All right, I'll accept responsibility and report that my automobile was stolen to the authorities. Additionally, she steals money and personal items from me each time she visits my home. What topic are you discussing? Regarding family matters, the police are powerless. Are you aware? Regardless of her familial relationship, she is guilty of grand larceny, or theft. Considering that we do not share a residence and that she is not my biological mother. Well, then, I guess I'll go file a complaint. Mason tried to stop me now that I was on my feet, and Phil chastised me. Here, who is the true scoundrel? I believe that you, Phil, are more of a scoundrel than your wife, who is a robber, and your son, who cheats and never offers an apology for the transgressions of your family. What? I laid out the messages on the desk and the printed pictures of Mason's affair. Let's file for divorce, Mason. You will, of course, pay the alimony in one large payment. What topic are you discussing? I've already had a legal consultation. An attorney? Is that not too much? If so, pay the alimony immediately and sign and stamp the divorce documents. I won't have to deal with a lawyer that way. I can't afford that type of money, you know that damn well. In addition, I don't see any reason why I shouldn't divorce you following such blatant infidelity. But you do love me, don't you, Faith? Not at all. You don't earn well, don't shield me from your mother, and you simply keep lying to me, and I've had enough. What happens if you are unable to pay? Then I'll leave it to the lawyer. Phil interrupted and asked me to wait after that. You won't call the police or a lawyer if I pay everything at once, right? You're correct. I won't sue you if you just do what I ask. All right. I will make the correct payment later, as the bank is currently closed. I'll allow him to immediately sign the divorce decree. Why, Dad? Why do you want to know? Mason received a stern look from Phil as he yelled, Don't you comprehend anything? You will be sued, and that will hurt my career. You'll be the laughingstock if your neighbors find out. My pride will not permit it. I'll give you the money this time, listen. However, please reimburse me each month. Got it? If not, I'll force you to work on a crab fishing boat, sell your organs, or do whatever it takes to pay me back. Okay. Phil was very conscious of appearances. He made Mason sign the divorce papers and even write a memorandum about repayment. Although Phil left everything to Mill in the household, Mill was a highly successful businessman who held a prominent position, so he appeared to prefer a peaceful resolution even if it meant taking a pay cut. Nevertheless, Phil's greed drove him to have Mason, his biological son, sign a memorandum for the loan he provided. I took everything out of Mason's room because the apartment was in my name. Well, most of it was clothes, manga books, and hobbies, since I'd been using the appliances and furniture since before we were married. I gave Mason back the keys, instructing him to return the extra key he'd given Mill to the mailbox, and Phil promised to get the key back if they didn't return it later. Phil reimbursed me for my losses, and the key was put back in the mailbox. Mason continued to babble about not wanting a divorce and about who would take care of his injured mother, but I just answered, "I don't know," blocked Mason's calls and messages, and ended our communication. I moved out shortly after and began a new life. 3 years later, I picked up a call from a number I didn't recognize, wondering who it could be. It was my Smill. "Faith, it's been a while. Thank goodness your phone number hasn't changed. After all this time, what does she want? What do you call for?" I kept hearing questions, but before I could say anything, my chatty Mill began to talk. "It seems like you were a terrible wife. You never paid me a visit when I was hurt and in the hospital. And once I was released from the hospital, you never came to look after me. And you made your own move out. I have no idea what you're considering. I don't owe it to myself to look after you, so why should I? Look at that, then. When I called, I was unable to get through to you at all, and you never returned my messages. I now have a new phone. I'm curious as to what exactly you found admirable." I asked my Mill what she needed by obtaining a new phone and phoning me then, since it appeared like she was always complaining. "And so you did end up divorcing my son. He was always too strong for you. Mason should get a divorce as quickly as feasible, I've been telling you." "Pardon me, what's that?" At last I realized my Mill was rambling on and on without purpose. "Mason and I separated 3 years ago," I said, nearly laughing at the dejected tone in Mill's voice, but I controlled myself. "We got divorced 3 years ago when you got into that car accident and had to go to the hospital." In addition to Mason's infidelity, there were other factors that contributed to the divorce, such as his tendency to be a mama's boy and his lack of housekeeping despite our equal expenditure sharing. "Oh, no. Who phoned me, then?" "I have no idea, even if you ask me, but according to my Mill, a man posing as Mason called lately and begged for money to pay for the divorce settlement, stating he didn't have any, so he gave the money to a man posing as Mason's friend. Thus, the individual who stole the money while posing as Mason's friend is unquestionably a con artist." "Unquestionably a scammer?" "It's none of my concern, but it appears my Mill was conned out of a sum startling enough to stun her. I have no idea how much was taken." Then, just as I'm about to hang up, Mill draws my attention. "Hey, don't you find me pathetic? I'll make sure to be careful myself and phone my parents later to warn them. I consider this a stroke of luck. Can you lend me some money?" "Well, I really feel bad for her and I sympathize, but in the end it's not my concern. Maybe you could ask your son. However, Mason has updated his contact details. My spouse is also unaware of this, and I'm not even sure where he is currently. Even when I was married, I always knew she was shameless, but I never thought she'd be this shameless. Please, I'm begging you." I responded by saying, "I see. Yay, well, if you give me back all the cash from the car and appliances that turned into scrap after you guys took them, as well as the money stolen from my wallet, then I'll consider it. I'll never be able to pay that back." "What topic are you discussing? Asking someone like that who has grown distant from you, what are you talking about? Betrays a lack of common sense. I could even start requesting it from you at this very moment. Are you without empathy? Sadly, I don't feel any sympathy at all for you people. Amazing. It was the appropriate choice to file for divorce and end my relationship with Mason. I'm through. My Phil tends to blabber, so he must have been telling Mason not to tell my Mill. My Phil will be retiring soon, and no matter how much he has been scammed, he will be furious if he finds out that someone from somewhere has taken the large sum of money he had saved for his retirement. Since my Phil is retiring soon, he would probably demand that my Mill work to pay the money, no matter how much she begs. My MIL calls unilaterally, then hangs up unilaterally. I don't want to be bothered by her pestering for money again, so I've blocked her new contact details. I thought it was a nice touch. Hop, Chaco. Chaco, basking in the sunlight on the windowsill, responded with a meow and a yawn. After divorcing my ex-husband, I became interested in cat rescue activities. After I started raising Chaco in the apartment, I moved to a friend of mine who was originally involved in volunteer rescue activities. Now that I had more time on my hands, I joined her for adoption events. I fell in love at first sight with Chaco, whom I met there. I continued to show up at the rescue organization where my friend was involved, offering to help with anything I could. They never minded answering my questions, and they were always kind, never making a face when I asked. They also always asked about Chaco's well-being, showing genuine concern. I'm proud to have formed good relationships with such wonderful people. One of them, a man, and I are planning to have dinner together. He seemed to have taken care of Chaco before, so he has even more affection for her. He said it would be great if he could keep Chaco, but he already had 3 rescue cats living in his house, so he was hesitant about taking on more. When I offered to take Chaco, he seemed delighted. He's a true cat enthusiast, always discussing rescue cats, his own pets, and stories about Chaco. When I mentioned how coming home tired from work and being greeted by cats makes all the tiredness vanish, he understood completely. Our conversation became animated, and for the first time in a while, I felt truly happy chatting with a man. I'm still not keen on marriage, but this time I want to take it slow without rushing and carefully assess my partner with the hope of eventually building a wonderful family together.